English and reading. I mean, English and writing. I'm reading and writing. So I'll give you guys a minute to just, I guess, refresh yourselves on this problem. Since I did do number 1 last class, I won't go over it again, but I will go over number 2. All right, so I'll get to started to solving this problem. So first, what you do is you take the third equation, which is 2x plus y minus z equals 0, and then you convert it, so you isolate for x. So you have 2x equals to negative y plus z. Then you plug in this 2x, or you could just simplify further for x, negative y over 2 plus z over 2 into the second equation. You get 4x, 4 negative y over 2 plus 2z over 2 plus y minus 3z equals to negative 6. Then after you simplify this, you get negative 2y plus 2z plus y minus 3z equals negative 6. Then you simplify this further by making this negative y plus, or in this case, negative y minus z equals to negative 6. Then you isolate for y, getting y equals to negative z, positive z minus 6. You flip the signs, y equals to negative z plus 6. And then you can plug in for y, and you can plug in for y into the original equation, this. And that this is also x. You plug in, I guess, negative 2 plus 6, negative z plus 6 over 2 plus z over 2, 8 times all this, plus 3 times negative z plus 6 plus 2z to get 22. And then you simplify this more by multiplying out the 8. So you get 4. So negative 4z plus 24 plus 4z plus negative 3z plus 18 plus 2z equals to 22. And if you simplify all of that, you get 7z plus 6. 7z minus 6 equals to 22, which I'm pretty sure that's what it goes up to. Or I might have missed on a step, because that's what you should get. And then you get 7z equals to 28 and z equals to 4. Let me just look over these steps again. Okay, so you start out with this. And then you go here. Okay, you get this. Plug it in here. Negative 2y plus 2z plus y. Oh, where does it say negative 2? the first step. It's negative z here. I do that wrong. So yeah, the answer is D, which is 4. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, 1 second, I will unmute.
I'm doing that actually.
I did get 4, but I used the elimination method. So is that,
Pardon?
so like I did get 4, like the answer 4, but I used the elimination method. Is that fine? That's fine, right?
Yeah, you can do this in multiple ways,
Yeah.
but if you got the answer 4, then yeah, you did it right, because that's the answer.
Okay, if anyone has questions, please raise your hand.
Okay, no questions? All right. We'll go to the next slide.
Akhil, I think you're muted yourself. Can you unmute?
I don't know why it's muting me all of a sudden. Okay.
Yeah, I think I think you're good now.
All right. So the SAT English portion is divided into 2 sections, reading and writing. The reading section is 52 multiple choice questions with 65 minutes overall. And there's 4 different passages that you have to do: fiction, historical documents, social sciences, and natural sciences. Writing is 44 multiple choice questions, 35 minutes, and has 3 main types of questions: grammar, vocabulary, context, and editing skills, which are tested in this. So yeah, this is just some basic knowledge about the SAT English section. We'll go into the next slide. So the types of problems in the SAT reading section: you have big picture questions, which ask about the author's point of view and like the main purpose of the passage, and like what it's trying to accomplish, which is around 11 questions. You have detail questions, which ask you about a specific detail in a passage. They can refer to a specific line in the passage and ask you what it means, or they give you a line number and ask you to find a detail that helps represent it. And this is 7 questions long. This is usually 7 questions. You have inference questions, which ask you to make a logical assumption based on details on the passage. So you have to basically infer what the passage is trying to say, or a passage or a line is trying to say, and determine like what it means to the passage as a whole. This is usually around 5 questions. Function questions will ask you to try to figure out what this line or paragraph is doing in the passage, and why the author used a certain word or phrase in that passage to accomplish whatever they're trying to do. This is usually around 5 questions as well. So it is relatively important still, although there isn't that many questions. So for vocabulary and context questions, they'll ask you about the definition of a word as it's used in the context of a passage. So the words that they use in the passage will be asking you to think about the nuance of the word, rather than you needing to know some obscure word that isn't really used in regular, I guess, readings. So more types of questions in the SAT reading section. You have analogy questions, which asks you to identify similarity between something in a passage and some hypothetical situation. It's only around 1 question a test, so it isn't that important, but you should still know how to do it just in case. You have author technique questions, which ask you about the author's tone and what the mood of the author is when he's trying to convey whatever he's trying to convey to the reader. This is also around 1 question. Again, not really important, but still you should know how to do these. You have evidence support questions, and these types of questions ask you to provide evidence for a question that was previously asked in the passage. And these can cost you the most points, as if you get the first question wrong, then you will most likely get the evidence support question wrong as well, simply because you're trying to find evidence for something that's wrong. There's usually around 10 questions of these type around in the SAT reading section. So this is a very important section, very important question type. Then you have data reasoning questions. So for data and reasoning questions, you have to interpret data in a graph and like place in the context of the overall passage. So basically, you're supposed to interpret a graph and tell like what it means to the passage overall, and answer a question about whether the graph is correct, or just make assumptions based off whatever you're given. This is around 5 questions. So again, it is pretty important. So any questions about the question types in SAT reading? Just raise your hand. Aditya?
Are the questions multiple choice?
Yeah, as I said before, all of them are multiple choice.
Okay, thank you.
Pardu?
Do we have to write an essay in the SAT or the ACT? Because I've heard that you have to or something about that.
So colleges don't really care about the essays anymore. SAT is completely taken it out. ACT still has it, but you don't need to write it. There's no mandatory thing. Not many colleges even ask for it.
So like, do you recommend taking it, or do you say
I
just
personally did
don't?
not,
Okay.
simply because there's no point. I feel like colleges just don't care about the essay anymore, and there's no point in taking them.
Okay. So like, what are the benefits of taking it? Are there like simply nothing for it?
As of right now, yeah, nothing. Before, colleges used to say, we want you to write the essay and we want a good score on it. Nowadays,
Okay.
it's, I guess, optional. And even if you do take it, it doesn't really help much.
Okay.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, we'll continue forward in the SAT writing section. So the SAT writing section has why does it keep muting me? So someone just asked how long should we spend on each question? This depends. Some passages you will want to spend more time on them. Others you just don't take that long in each question. I would say around, I guess, a minute-ish on each question for the reading section, simply because there's a lot of questions and not too much time. And you want to have like a 5-minute, I guess, reserve time, just in case you encounter a question that's really hard and you just need some more time to do it. So someone asked, should you take the English essay, the SAT essay or ACT essay if you're going to take an English major? I don't think it matters. Even if you are taking an English major, the thing is, say SAT is just completely taking it out, and ACT only provides it for, I'm going to guess they're going to remove it as well. Colleges just don't care, even if you are doing an English major. All right, someone just asked, go ahead. Okay, so all the questions are worth, I guess, so we don't entirely know what the questions are worth, simply because SAT doesn't disclose how much a question's worth. You have certain difficulty ranges, but other than that, like they don't tell you how they score a section or even the whole test. So Karthik, so basically you can't do any section at any time. You have to do, I think the order is English, writing, math without calculator, math with calculator, and in that order. And if you finish early, you still can't go ahead. You can only go back and review the section that you just did. So these slides here, I'll give you guys a link. Second. Here, here is a link to the slides. Okay, so going back a couple questions. So the questions, okay, there's no specific order in the questions. Sometimes it gets harder. Other times you suddenly have easier questions. In the math section, I'm almost certainly sure it does get harder. For the reading and writing, I'm not entirely sure. For the math section, you start off relatively easy. First couple of questions should be pretty fast, and you progressively get harder until you get to the end of the multiple choice questions for math. And then you get easier free response questions, but those also get harder over the course of 4 questions. So yeah, there is some sections which have it go progressively harder. So to the person who's asking, is taking both the SAT and ACT worth it? Depends. If you get a good score in one of them, there's no point in taking the other one. I took both simply because I just signed up for it a while ago and I just didn't bother on signing up. And I didn't really study for the ACT. I did study for a lot for the SAT. So I guess it's just a matter of time. If you have the time, I guess go ahead. But I would say there's no point in taking both of them unless you feel like you're going to do better on the other one. So someone asked if I have a question in, like I say, reading, and if you're done with the whole test, you can't go back and work on it. You cannot. You can only work on a question while you're in that section, and there's no, I guess, returning to a question after you're done with that section. To someone else, yeah, the writing was removed for the SAT, but the ACT still has a writing section. To the person who asked for any techniques for the reading section, I guess I'll go through it while I'm doing the problems with you guys, but I would say writing down, or at least thinking of a sentence after you read each paragraph in a passage, helps you basically learn what that passage is trying to tell you, and you don't need to go back and repeatedly look at the passage for its main point when you're answering the questions. I'll show you as we do questions later, but yeah. So to the person who's asking, is there any pattern to answer the entire reading and writing questions with quickly glancing at the entire whole passage? I personally don't know. I read every passage as thoroughly as I can while just writing down a sentence on the side of each paragraph. I do read a bit fast though, so I guess that helps. But there's no way to quickly glance through an entire passage and just know what you need to know for each question. If you do just quickly glance through, you're gonna need to go back to the passage every single time you encounter a question you just don't know. So the difference between the SAT and ACT, so I did that in the first slides. If you go back there, it says there as well, but a quick overview, the SAT and ACT are basically just alternatives to each other. You could take either one, colleges don't really care. But the ACT is known for, I guess, having not easier, easier math problems, and the SAT is known for having harder math problems. And on the SAT, the math is worth more than what math is worth in the ACT. So the person who was asking how long should you study for the SAT, I answered that in the first slides as well. You could just go back and look at it. So the person who was asking if both of them have the same type of questions, yes, they do have the same type of questions 99% of the time. Just the ACT has a bit more, I guess, sections. No, the ACT has a bit more topics for math, while the SAT just goes in on deeper. So to the person who's asking, do you have to study both separately, or you can study for the same one? I guess they're overlapping 99% of the time. You can study for one and just take the other and do fine on it. That's what I did. I studied for the SAT. I studied, I think, one day for the ACT, and I did fine on it, simply because everything that was on the SAT is also on the ACT, and vice versa. So there is no one test that colleges prefer. It's just dependent on what college you're applying to. Some colleges have higher acceptance rates for one college versus the other college. I mean, one test versus the other test. And I guess you just have to research what college you're applying to and figure out if, I guess, taking the SAT or ACT is better for that college. But most of the time they are equal, and there's no one test that colleges prefer. Okay, so that's it for the questions. I'll go on to ACT, I mean the writing section. All right. So the writing section has a couple of question types as well. You have command of evidence questions. 1 second, I'm just gonna close all of this over here. So yeah, the writing section has command of evidence questions, which are basically the big picture questions from the reading section. And you're basically asked to add like a supporting detail or an extra sentence or remove a sentence to make the passage more clear. You have words in context, which is more of like the small detail questions when reading passages. You have to look at a specific word and you have to replace it with something that makes sense or makes better sense. You have expression of idea questions, which basically ask you how ideas are expressed. You might need to rearrange like the order of the sentences to improve the flow or to strengthen whatever argument you have. And you might even need to just delete a sentence entirely. About 50% of the questions on the SAT writing section is grammar rules, grammar and punctuation rules. So with that, you need to know these as well as you can, simply because of the sheer number of questions that are there for them. There are a couple couple of grammar rules that are really important, but you can search them online and most websites will give you what they are. Then you have data interpretation questions. These are basically graph questions that communicate like some data incorrectly. And this graphic will be like related to the passage in some way, but it just could be described incorrectly. And you're supposed to change whatever sentence refers to that passage, that graph, to better match the data. All right, so any questions about the writing section? Right, seems like, oh, pardon.
How many questions are in the writing section?
1 second. There's 44.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question? Just raise your hand. Krishna?
Yeah. So there are 4 sections now required in the SAT, right?
There were always 4 sections, if I'm not wrong, even in the old SAT. Math with calc, math without calc, English and writing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Kamal, yeah.
Okay, if this isn't really pertaining to the writing section, but will there be quadratics on the SAT?
Well, yes, I'm pretty sure there isn't. There's some, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess there's no more questions. I think 1 sec, I'll put the recordings for all 3 slides. 1 second. There's people asking for the links to the last 2 weeks slides.
I already sent that, Aki, to everyone a few minutes back, so they should have that link.
Okay, I'm pretty sure those were recordings, but yeah.
Yeah, I just sent it I sent it to everybody. Please copy that link. It's in the chat. And also at the end of the session, I'll post it again so that you have the link for the previous sessions. I think we should continue.
All right, so we'll get to practice problems. So we'll do a practice passage. I guess I'll give you guys a minute just to read over this real quick, and I will go over it myself after. Just, I guess, put a just have a reaction on in the chat just to tell me after you're done reading this, and I'll go down to the remaining passage, the rest of the passage. Or actually, no, what would be best is if you guys could just copy the link up here, just type it in your URL and look at it, and I will go over it while you guys read it. All right, so I'll start going over this. So the role of African American authors in what we broadly call American literature is now well known. Not only is Toni Morrison widely revered as the greatest novelist of the era after World War II, Zora Neale Hurston's "Their Eyes Were Watching God" in 1937 is the most read book in American high schools. What many do not realize is that the tradition of African American literature goes back to the origins of the country itself. While the widespread practice of slavery and its attendant prohibitions on literacy stained American history for many hundreds of years, a few remarkable individuals wrote on, and not just in the form of slave narratives like that of Frederick Douglass, but in the less overtly political arts of poetry and fiction. So basically, what we can get from this, what I recommend after reading every passage, is just to take a minute and 1 second. It's just to take a minute and quickly just like write a quick sentence on what this paragraph is. So this paragraph is about how African American authors are very popular now, and their history dates back, and the history of writing, their history of writing dates back to the origins of the nation itself. So the reason why I do this is so I don't have to go back and look at all this real big paragraph again. And instead, since I wrote it down, my brain would remember what this paragraph is about a bit more than just reading it. Also, if I do need to like go back and look for the general, I guess, importance of this passage, I have it right here. And it's a lot easier for me to just read this than read all of the entire passage here, or the paragraph here. All right, we'll continue. The next passage. So perhaps one of the most curious of these early authors is Phillis Wheatley, the first published African-American poet in the United States. Although the exact circumstances are unknown, Wheatley was born in West Africa. Wheatley scholars hypothesize that it was either more modern-day Gambia or Senegal around 1753. When Wheatley was 8 years old, she was captured by slave traders and sold to wealthy Boston merchant John Wheatley. This single event contains so many facets that point to how remarkable and tragic Wheatley's story is. Her very name, Phillis Wheatley, is a combination of her master and the slave ship, the Phillis, that abducted her from her homeland. Then she was a slave in Massachusetts, a state known for its abolitionists in that brief period before 1783, when slavery was effectively abolished in the northern states. All of these circumstances and contradictions certainly go some of the way to explaining Wheatley's remarkable achievements, but they do just as much to make us wonder how she was able to achieve them all. So basically, what this paragraph says, after I get the drawing. Okay, what this paragraph says is it talks about Phillis Wheatley. And her background. And like and the fact that fact that she was the first published African American poet. So as I said before, this is a lot faster for me to read than reading all of this. And this effectively summarizes what I have, what this entire paragraph is about, and would help me just remember it better. Right. I will clear this and we'll go down. All right. So while his honorary term may seem like a cruel oxymoron to us today, John Wheatley was a progressive slave owner, which meant primarily that he devoted some of his resources to his slaves through education. By the time she was 12 years old, Phyllis could read the New Testament in Greek, and she was familiar with the great Roman works in their original Latin. Seeing that Phyllis had a special aptitude for these subjects, the Wheatleys soon gave Phyllis's duties to other slaves and allowed her to focus on her studies and soon her poetry. So this paragraph basically talks about how Phyllis learned how to read, learned how to read, I guess. Yeah, how to read and write. Read and write. And it talks about how, like, why her masters allowed her to be educated. Okay, Wheatley's story only becomes more fantastic from there. In 1776, Wheatley sent a copy of her poem to His Excellency George Washington, to Washington himself, and she was invited to his headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to meet him soon after. Thomas Paine included to His Excellency in the Pennsylvania Gazette in April 1776, and Thomas Jefferson posted Wheatley's poems in the notes on the state of Virginia, 1801 to 1805. So basically, this passage describes how she became famous. She gained fame. Tragically, for all her favorable circumstances, Wheatley could not continue her successes. John Wheatley freed Wheatley at his death in 1776. Shortly thereafter, Wheatley married a free man of color, but the couple was soon racked with debt and hardship. By the time of her death in 1784, at the young age of 31, Wheatley is completely impoverished, suffering on the meager wages she earned from domestic work. Even though Wheatley had been freed from a progressive state, racism and sexism were rampant in all parts of the country at that time, and Wheatley could not find her place as a plain citizen, let alone as a famous poet. So this describes her ending as an impoverished person. Then we'll clear and we'll continue going down. All right. Today, Wheatley's story seems to provide more questions than answers. For one, Wheatley was never outwardly critical of her or resistant to her place as a slave. Her most famous poem, on being brought from Africa to America, begins with the curious lines: "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand. Nothing of abduction or cruelty at all," until the final lines: "Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." But even here, Wheatley seems to be suggesting that all Africans can be, in a sense, redeemed by an experience like the one she had. That is, in the experience as a slave of a refined white owner. So basically, this paragraph talks about how she was never really resistant never resistant to slavery, and gave examples of her work. Gave examples from her work. Wheatley's poems are more read today than they had been in many years. And while her story does not seem to contain all of the hallmarks of overcoming adversity that we might expect from a freed slave, the story nevertheless shows a triumph over the odds and a revealing look into the mind of one among history's most voiceless groups. This basically is the effect of Wheatley after she died. All right. So we'll go down. So the primary passage of the passage as a whole. So we can immediately take, so the thing with English reading, SAT reading questions is there's always going to be at least two just plain wrong answers, and you will know them immediately. So you should always just start crossing them out. So nowhere in the passage does it criticize the readers. So for B, describe the life and work of an author while noting some of the complications of that life and work. So as we said before, this sounds really promising, I guess, as an answer, simply because we did talk about Phyllis Wheatley's life and work, and we learned about the complications of her life and what happened after. Outline a history of African American literature and discuss its major figures. This is obviously incorrect because it only talks about one of them. Praise one slaveholder for his particularly forward thinking by showing his kindness to slaves. So this is also wrong simply because it only says he was kind to one person, that was Wheatley, and that was because she was talented. So you can take this out, and this is our answer, B. Based on the information on the passage, Phyllis Wheatley's life can be best described as, A, difficult because she was never freed from slavery despite her fame as a poet. That is obviously incorrect, simply because she was freed after her master died. B, charmed because she was given so many wonderful opportunities upon arriving at the Wheatley's house. That is also incorrect, simply because it doesn't talk about it anywhere. C, impressive, although it contains many aspects that are troubling or confusing to present-day readers. Sounds promising. D, contemplative, although some of the sentiments in her work show a refusal to think deeply about her own life. Nowhere in the passage does it talk about her thinking about her deep life, her own life, and I don't think a question would ask you to as an answer where it doesn't mention it at all in the passage. So I'll cross out D as well, and C is our answer. So which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So A, we go up 18 to 24. Although her exact circumstances are unknown, Wheatley was born in West Africa. That is incorrect simply because it's talking about where she was born and such. 1 second. All right. B, 48 to 56. 48 to 56. So Wheatley's story only became more fantastic from there. In 1776, Wheatley sent a copy of her poem to His Excellency George Washington. That doesn't sound like, that does not, 1 second. Okay, that doesn't, oh wait, I went too far down. Okay. That doesn't sound like any aspects that are troubling or confusing to present day readers, because it's only talking about how like she became famous because of her letter to George Washington, and how Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine included her in their works. So that's wrong as well. 57 to 69. Tragically, for all of our favorable circumstances, this line alone makes me want to choose it, simply because what we chose as the answer before, this line alone makes me want to choose it simply because what we talked about before in the previous question was that there's many aspects that are troubling or confusing to present day readers. And tragically is a very negative word. And this entire passage, as I wrote down before, is about her ending and how she died a very sad death. So that sounds like a very promising answer. So I'll just start this. Okay, 84 to 80 and 84 to 90. Wheatley's poems are more read today than they have been in many years. While her story does not seem to contain all the hallmarks of overcoming adversity that we might expect from a freed slave, the story nevertheless shows a triumph over the odds and a revealing look into the minds of one among history's most voiceless groups. This does not really seem very tragic, first of all, and it isn't really troubling or confusing, and it just talks about its effects, the effects of her work today. So this is not an answer either. So I would say the answer is C. Seems that we have some questions. Second. So basically, troubling and confusing about the passage. So it's troubling and confusing simply because, so 1 second. I'm having some technical issues.
Are you able to see the screen, Akhil?
Having some some technical issues. I'm gonna leave and rejoin 1 second.
Okay. While Akhil is doing that, I posted the link for the crack sat.net to everyone. Please save it locally.
I'm gonna make you host and then leave and rejoin.
Yeah, that should be okay. Guys, please hang on for a minute. We'll be right back.
Could you make me host again? Or wait, I have, yeah, okay, I got host permissions again.
Yeah, you should be all set, Akhil.
Yeah, 1 second. 1 second. I'm trying to find the correct thing to share. 1 second. Oops, wrong thing. 1 second. There. So yeah, as I was saying before, the reason why C is the right answer here is because, first of all, the passage does talk about how her poetic achievements were really impressive for being part of one of the most historically, I guess, unrepresented groups. And also, it also talks about how like her story became really tragic afterwards due to all the stuff that happened because after she was freed. And that is why it is troubling here. 1 second. That's why the troubling part is here. The impressive part is because all of her poetic achievements were amazing, amazing for that time. And so the reason why there's none of the other choices, another reason is just simply because the other choices just don't work. A doesn't work because she was freed. B doesn't work because it doesn't talk about her being charmed because she was enslaved. And D doesn't work because there nowhere in the passages that say she doesn't want to talk about her own life. I hope that answers the question of whoever asked it before. Oh, 1 second. That was an accident. So yeah, whoever asked that question before, could you just message me saying you got it, or do I need to explain it again? All right, I'll continue. So what does the passage suggest about the passage suggests which of the following about Phyllis Wheatley's popularity? So this is another process of elimination problem. You could take out A. Her family was not really prominent in Massachusetts. Nowhere does it say this word or anything similar to it. And she never really gained connections through it. She found them herself. B can also be crossed out simply because nowhere in the passage does it say this. Nowhere in the passage does it say she got fame in Europe. For the next question, for the next part, you can say, so yeah, C doesn't work either, simply because it does say that more people read her now than before. So that this automatically makes this part of the statement wrong. And the answer is D, simply because, as mentioned by the prominent people, is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Paine, and all of them admired her writing and put him in her works. And her life was still difficult, even though she did do all of that. So the answer is D here. Also, I'm just going to select all the answers as we go so we can check our results after. So B, C, D. All right, so which choice provides the best evidence to the answer in the previous question? Okay, so we have to go back up. So lines 1 to 6 and 84 to 90. So 84 to 90, first of all. So this last passage sounds pretty good as a good support. However, I don't think it fully encapsulates everything, but we'll still say it's pretty good. Well, no, this one doesn't support it at all. Wait, I looked at it wrong. Nowhere does it say that in this paragraph that powerful people liked her, admired her work, and it doesn't say anywhere that her life was tough. You go to the first, what is it, 1 to 6? 1 to 6. So nowhere in this passage does it say her work was admired. Nowhere in this does it say her work was admired or that her life was difficult. So you could take out that entirely. So neither of those worked. Therefore, you can cross out A. It can be crossed out. Choice B, 24 to 32. 24 to 32. 24 to 32. Okay, so 24, the single event contains so many facets. Okay, so this sentence sounds pretty good. However, the rest of it is not really, I guess, talking about like why people liked her. So we have to see what the other one is. 73 to 83. So 73 to 83 talks about how she never really talked about how slavery was bad. From here to here, it doesn't talk about how slavery was bad anywhere. Or no, from here up to here. It just says she never talked about slavery as a bad thing. So that isn't the answer either, simply because it doesn't talk about everything. So we go back to here. A and B can be crossed out. C, lines 44 to 47. So lines 44 to 47. so lines 44 to 47 talk about how since Phyllis was really good at these subjects, the Wheatleys gave her more, I guess, freedom and to learn. That isn't what the previous question, the answer to our previous question was. So we can immediately cross that one out. So you have A, B, and C crossed out. And by process of elimination, it should be D. However, we should always go back and check just in case we did something wrong. So 48 to 56. 48 to 56. I'm just gonna clear this all. 48 to 56. So it already looks promising since this is a passage where they talked about how she became famous. We know that. And then the other one is 57 to 65. So 57 to 65, also this. And this also talks about how she had a tragic life afterwards. So this answer is the only real one that works. Therefore, our answer there is D. So the reference to Frederick Douglass in lines 13 to 14 primarily serves to so 13 to 14, what does 13 to 14 do? So 13 to 14, like that of Frederick Douglass, slave. Okay, so Frederick Douglass wrote slave narratives, and but the other African Americans wrote different types of literature, is what it's saying. So that is what I got from there. So it's not A. Nowhere in the passage does it say his life story was less interesting than Wheatley's. B sounds interesting because that's what I just said. That it's alluding to a different type of literature. C, noting discrepancy in literary history that is not often acknowledged, also doesn't sound right. There's no discrepancy noted anywhere. And D, refer to a friend of Wheatley's who encouraged the publication of her work. Nowhere does it say Frederick Douglass and Wheatley had any communication. So you could take this one out as well, and you get the answer as B. All right. In context, the circumstances in line 19 refer to 19 is one sec. Yeah, 19 is, so what we can infer from this is so exactly how so this is like talking the exact details of how she was where she was born, how she was born is not known. So the circumstances, like, yeah, what, so the exact details aren't known. And with that, you can say A sounds like a really good answer already, so we'll star that. B, unintended consequences and failures, that doesn't sound like it either because that's not details. C, it is details, but weather and climate conditions aren't really important, and I don't think would be used in a context of a birth. And D also sounds like a pretty good idea, but we're talking about Phyllis Wheatley's birth, and therefore complete biographical details is what makes me choose A instead of D. All right. All right. Question 8. The information in lines 41 to 47 primarily illustrates Phyllis Wheatley's, so 41 to 47. Okay, it is 41 to 47, right? 41 to 47. So by the time she was 12 years old. So yeah, what is it asking exactly? Primarily illustrates, okay, 40. Okay, so basically what this entire passage is doing is talking about why they allowed her to read and write. And this I guess the section of it basically tells us that she has a lot of talent, and that's why she was allowed to learn how to read, write, and read and write. So with that, we go back down here, and we look at these. So A already sounds pretty good because that's remarkable aptitude is like her talents. B, poetic nature. Nowhere does it say that she had a poetic nature in there. C, vicious subjugation. No, that sounds far too rough because over there it just said they allowed her to read and write and took her extra duties out of her. And confounding life doesn't sound right either because they just talked about her talents in that passage. So A is the answer. The word progressive appears in quotations in line 39 and 66 in order to emphasize. All right, so lines 39 and 66. In line 39, okay, so basically it's saying, although like, so in this passage, it says, although it is kind of weird to think of any slave owner as progressive, John Wheatley was a progressive slave owner at that time. So basically it's like confounding for us currently. And 66 in a progressive state. So basically back then, any state that had slavery and racism and sexism isn't really progressive in our current times, but back then it was progressive. So I guess it's just a difference of what it was back then versus what it is right now. So the remarkable achievements, this doesn't sound right at all. That makes no sense at all. Those who behave well before it is common to do so. First, behaving well is not really a good descriptor, first of all. So for B, the awkwardness of using contemporary terms to describe past events, that was what I was talking about. There's a difference between what's considered, I guess, progressive now versus progressive back then. And to use the word progressive for events back then, while when it doesn't really fit what events are right now, just makes it really weird. It's really awkward to do so. So yeah, that sounds like a good answer. I don't know why I circled it. 1 second. So the difficult nature of describing negative behavior in a positive way, that doesn't sound like what the use of progressive was. They're like, it's a good thing for that time. So that doesn't sound like the answer. The fact that the word came from first Wheatley's poetry and essays, that is not mentioned anywhere in the passage. So B is our answer. All right, as used in line 86, hallmarks most nearly means 86. While a story does not seem to contain all the hallmarks of overcoming adversity, so all of like the features and like the distinctions, I feel that's what I feel hallmarks is representing, the features and distinctions of overcoming adversity. So we go back down. Is there anything that says features, distinctive features, adversity? Yes, there's one of them. So just start this. Ordinal greetings. That doesn't sound like what I said. Political leanings. That also doesn't sound like what I just said. And troublesome qualities also doesn't sound like what I said. Actually, no. Yeah, it doesn't sound like what I said. Therefore, A is our only valid answer. All right. So before I turn, I'll just submit this. We'll see what I got. All right, I got 10 questions, right? So anyone have a question about these? Just raise your hand, I guess, if you do. Kamal.
Is there more? Is there more of these we can do in our own time?
Yeah, so that link I just gave you guys,
Mhm.
if you go on here, if you click on this, there's like 100 different practice reading tests.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so question 8. Someone just asked question 8. Question 8, 41 to 47. So basically 41 to 47 talks about all of her talents that she had that made her, that like allowed her masters to say, yes, it's worth it for her to learn to be educated versus like just through manual labor like most slaves did back then. Oh wait, you meant question 9. All right. Question 9 is the progressive one. Okay, so I think I remember exactly how I did this one, but so I crossed out A because it never said it was a remarkable achievement, first of all. Even if it was uncommon back then, it wasn't really a remarkable achievement. The answer is B because I guess back then it was progressive to not to allow your slaves to be educated and to, I guess, free slaves. But now it isn't really progressive to even have slaves in the first place. So it's just awkward to use the word progressive to describe something that is considered bad today for something that happened in the past. So it doesn't talk about negative behavior at all. Like in both uses of progressive, it's about a progressive state and the progressive master. So nowhere in it does it say that they had negative behavior. And then for D, it doesn't say anywhere that the word came from Wheatley's poetry and essays. All right, to the person who asked when did class start, class started at 11:30, and it's gonna end at 1 o'clock. All right, Srinivas Banda.
So basically, if you don't know like the meaning of a word, or if you don't know like in what context it is, how would you infer if you
So
like
give me
have
an
no
example.
clue what it is?
So like if you didn't know what hallmarks meant, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, some
Okay.
like not specifically hallmarks, but in general in like the SAT.
So for the SAT, they don't expect you to know all the words, first of all. And there's always gonna be context clues. Like if you just straight up just took out the word hallmarks here, and if you look around the general stuff, what do you think would go over here? It's just like distinct features, right? You'd think that it's like something about it's something different about them. Here, I unmuted you again.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sai.
Yeah, so like whenever you summarize each paragraph, do you just like look at the main ideas and just do it, or do you just like skim through it and just like just paraphrase it?
So I read through the whole thing. I read through all the passages like word by word, even on the SAT itself. And I just do, I guess, like a quick summary of it, include any important details that I think might be important just in case. Like in the first one, I'm like, in the first one, I just was really general about it. The second one, I talked about a little bit about Wheatley herself, instead of just saying this is Wheatley's information and stuff like that. It just depends paragraph by paragraph. If you still have a question, keep your hand up, but otherwise just lower your hand. Yeah, I unmuted you if you have it. Okay, no. Sanvi?
I just want the link for the thing because I had to join late because my internet was not working for like 40 minutes. So
what do you want the link for?
For the SAT practice test that you're doing right now.
Just look at this thing up here. I don't have it myself. I have to leave and rejoin.
Okay.
Just use the URL up here, and there's a bunch more practice tests if you just click on this here.
So cracksat.net.
Cracksat.net/SAT and all that. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you use this for your SAT practice? Like this?
No, I use Khan Academy, but like it's really hard to open up the Khan Academy thing without looking at it beforehand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I want to just look at this beforehand.
Okay.
1 second, I have to unmute my admin. Apparently he got muted somehow. There. All right. Sanvi, do you still have a Sanvi? Okay. Thiksha, I think that's how you say your name.
So I was wondering, like for every paragraph kind of thing, would it be just as effective as paraphrasing if you like just highlight the main parts?
I mean, I guess you could, but I just write it that way simply because it's a lot easier for me to read like I guess 2 sentences versus skimming through a paragraph, looking for the highlighted parts and then trying to understand what's around it.
Okay.
Meghana?
So I just have a general question. So like when they ask for like the author's tone or mood and they give like adjectives, is there any way to like study the vocab for SAT?
For adjective, okay, so I don't really think there's any real way to do that. You just have to look at the whole passage as a whole and just like think about how the author is writing to his or her readers. Some passages it's just really easy to know like they're a calm and informative person, or like they're passionate and they write in really, I guess, aggressive tones.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's no real way to like memorize vocab for it.
Okay. Thank you.
So to the person who was asking me to look at question 2 again. So the thing is, with question 2, it's process of elimination, first of all. A just doesn't work at all. Just number 1 just doesn't work simply because she was freed. B, I mean, yeah, the answer to number 2 is C, right? So yeah, B doesn't work as well because like it never said she was charmed. Like going into slavery is a bad thing no matter what. There's no good part about slavery. C, we talked about a bunch, and D, nowhere in the passage does it say like she has a refusal to think about her own life. So you could just cross out D. And C is the only option left. But even in C, it's impressive because she had her achievements in poetry were great for that time. It's troubling because she had a bad life after that. And it's not really confusing, but with this question itself, like you can just cross them out and you get C anyways. I'm not entirely sure why it says it's confusing, but it's the only answer that works. I hope that answered the question too, whoever. Yeah. 1 second. Clear. Lore last week though?
Yeah. So question 3.
Mm-hmm.
So those questions where they ask like lines this through that, is there like a quick way to like do that? Like, do we have to read through all of them, or is there like a faster way to like?
If you remembered like what a certain section was, I guess you could, but like there's no real way to getting it right every single time without actually going and reading the lines again, simply because there's no way you're memorizing the whole passage in the time given. And there's no way to know that like there's some detail you just forgot about in those lines that help support your thing. I'll unmute you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's it for questions. We'll go to the writing practice questions. All right, so for writing, I'll give you guys, I guess, a minute just to look at this real quick, and then I'll do it myself. And while they're doing it, Karen, if you have a question, just.
I just have a question about writing part. Can there be multiple answers for one question?
No, there's never multiple answers for it. There's some, I'm just gonna say this right now and read in English as a whole. There's always gonna be 2 questions that are obviously wrong for both writing and reading. And then there's always that one question that could be right, but isn't really right, simply because the other question is a better choice for it.
Okay, thank you.
Could you lower your hand after? Yeah, thanks. All right, I'll do this problem now. So for this type of problem, first of all, let me just get the draw button. All right, so it's not going to be no change, simply because former and prior are both, they mean the same thing. Former and prior basically means the original owner, I guess, or the previous owner. So it can't be no change. Please acquiring from the, so assumed in this case, in this context, basically means you acquired it from. You can't repeat the same thing twice in a sentence. That's just not correct. Therefore, B is also wrong. C, Lee's obtained from the previous. So as I just said, it's the same reason as B. You can't assume and then obtain in the same line simply because that's just repeating unnecessary information. So C is also wrong. And D, leaves from the previous landlord. This is the most concise and the only answer that like works the best. Any questions on this one? All right. If no one has any questions, I'll just go on to the next question. Clear. There. All right. Oh, Pardu. Oh, wait. I think I might have muted you again.
So on the SAT, are they gonna ask like what's the best choice? Because they do that sometimes in our tests. Will they do that? Like, what's the best choice?
I'm pretty sure there are some questions that ask specifically what is the best choice, but you have to assume in all SAT questions that it is what's the best choice.
Okay.
Simply because like some SAT questions have answers that seem like they're both right. You just have to choose a better one.
Okay.
I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to do this one. All right. So for this question, it's asking a question of wait 1 second. I'm just gonna look at this question again. So whether he preferred the salmon sushi or the shrimp roll, it's possible that he eat like. Okay, so A sounds like a possible solution. B, roll. So basically what this is doing is it's asking a question, does he prefer the salmon sushi or the shrimp roll? And if you just if you just put in a question mark, that isn't really asking a question, so this is wrong. This question, the only difference between A and C is this, and what this sentence is trying to say is it is possible that he liked both of them equally, and you can't just say it's possible that he liked both of them equally without the apostrophe. And D, roll, it's the same reason as B, it can't be a period here. So therefore A is the answer. Roshan?
Yeah, this is supposed to be a statement, not a question, right?
1 second, it's not clear. Wait, I looked at this one wrong. Okay, so apparently I put my answer over here wrong, and I was trying to justify it. Yeah, then it would be B. Yeah, I looked at it wrong. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the answer is B, and you can cross out A and C simply because it can't be a question mark, and D wouldn't work because the word it's is not with apostrophe. Yeah, and the answer is B here. Ansika Unkalo?
Never mind. It was just, I had the same thing to say as the other person.
Yeah, I read the question wrong. I'm sorry about that. All right. I guess there's no more question. Oh, wait. Do you still have a question? If so, yeah, thank you. Clear. Next question. All right, I'll answer this question in another 10 to 15 seconds. All right, so for this question, what it's asking us to do is it's asking us to make all the, I guess, tenses correct, or like all of them the same. So flying react, and make decisions aren't all the same. Flying is just clearly different from these two, therefore it can't be A. Flew is past tense. That is also not what it would be. If the only way flew would be right is if it was reacted and made decisions. And right now it's present, so react and make decisions. Fly works because fly, react, and make decisions are all part of the same tense. So this seems like a right answer already. And having flown also doesn't work simply because it's a different tense. So the answer is C. Any questions? No? All right. Give you guys a minute to do this one as well. All right, I'll do this question. So for this one, what it's asking us to do is to make this, I guess, series of objects, correct? So for this, it's asking us to make these three things. Oh, that was the wrong thing. I forgot to hit draw. So A can't be the answer because you can't just have three objects in a row without any intermediate, I guess, punctuation. B sounds correct simply because it's commas and commas allow for objects in a series. So let's do this. This doesn't sound correct because sharp rocks and piranhas are both objects and you can't do colons with one of the objects outside one of the objects inside. And D, you can't use semicolons because semicolons can't replace commas in a series of objects. Therefore, B is the only right answer. Any questions? No? All right. All right. This should be, I think, the last question, and I'll just say what you guys need to do next class, and we'll have an open Q&A for whatever doubts you guys have. It doesn't even have to be about this class's thing. It could be from a previous class. All right, this question is also pretty simple. I'll just do it. All right, so for this question, this section of the sentence is basically a descriptor for teenagers and isn't entirely necessary. Therefore, you can have you could have another comma over here, and the only option with a comma is D. But we'll just go through this. You can't have a single bracket without a starting bracket on this side, so therefore A can't be the answer. As I said, this section isn't necessary at all and can be entirely removed without this the sentence changing. And you can't just have a comma and then just no comma afterwards. So B doesn't work. C doesn't work for the same reason that A doesn't work. You can't just have a dash here and not have another dash. But yes, you could. But the rest of the sentence is not describing teenagers who recently had who is not like emphasizing something. So therefore, C doesn't work. Right, any questions about this? None? All right. So what you guys need to do for next class, just review algebra again. There isn't really much else you could do as of this moment. Just take a practice SAT or ACT if you haven't taken one yet and just see how you do on it. It doesn't matter if you don't get a good score simply because it's a diagnostic test and it's not your real test. but it's good to know where you are at this current point of time, so you can ask questions for, I guess, subjects that you just don't know. What we'll be covering in this class is graphing linear equations, linear function word problems, systems of linear inequalities, and solving systems of linear equations. Yeah, and then just questions. If you guys have any general questions, I'll answer them right now. Last Rita.
Yeah, so is there gonna be on the math section in the SAT like pre-calc or calculus problems?
No calculus. I'm not. There might be a little bit of pre-calc, not too much.
Okay, thank you.
To the person who's asking what's considered a good score in the SAT, this depends on what college you want to apply to. The general accepted like grade SAT score, even for Ivies, is a 1530 and above for Ivies, and I guess that's like the highest threshold you can have. But a good SAT score depends on what college you want to go to. Some colleges have lower SAT score requirements, others higher. Sanvi?
I just want to ask, so if I take a practice test, what should be like a score I'm aiming for? And I'm in 9th grade.
This depends on what you want to like apply to, what colleges you want to apply to, like what
I mean, for Ivy League, I'm just saying at the moment, what should be like the goal?
At the moment, I mean, at the moment you can get whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Like there's no like set requirement you want for 9th grade. In like 10th and 11th, there might be a little bit of like, if you want to get 1550, then you should get a certain amount of score. But like 9th grade, you have a lot of time to improve. And even if you do get somehow by like chance, you just mess up on the entire SAT and get like a 10, 100, 1000, it still doesn't matter.
Okay. Also, one more thing. If calculus is like not going to be on the SAT, like what's the highest amount of like questions like class by class? Like, is it really a cap at like algebra 2, or does it cap at like trigonometry, or?
I'm pretty no. So the ACT has some trigonometry. SAT does not. I'm pretty sure there's some algebra 2 questions on the SAT. Maybe like 1 or 2 max though. I'm not entirely. Simply because it changes test per test. Some tests just have a lot more of the harder questions. Others just have a lot more basic questions.
Okay. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Diksha?
So is the SAT like all multiple choice, or are there any writing questions?
So for the reading and in writing, it's all multiple choice. For the math, it's mostly multiple choice, but there is some free response, which is like you have to calculate it and then you have to put in the numbers in like blanks. Sri Ram.
Hello. So I have a question. For SAT, when you were preparing for it, did you like take any notes? If so, how did you like frame them?
To what?
For like SAT, like, did you like take any notes like for math section or like, you know, anything like wrote down formulas or something like that?
You can't take them to the SAT itself, first of all.
Yeah.
So like what I did for the SAT is I didn't write down too many notes. I just did a lot of practice. Practice is probably your best option in preparing for the SAT. Nothing that was on the SAT. So basically, SAT tests stuff that you already know from school, but just in really weird ways. As long as you're used to like the format that they do it in, you'll do fine on it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. If no one has any questions, that is class. It's 1 o'clock basically. You guys can go. I just have to figure out how to get the recording. 1 second.